"You're out of your mind, Claire. Your brother deserves this house more than you ever will." My stepdad, Harold, thundered, slamming the deed onto the table. Every guest froze. Karen, my mom, crossed her arms, her voice like glass. "He has a wife and a baby. You have nothing." The words cut deeper than a slap. My chest tightened, the walls pressed in, and David leaned back, smirking. The silence after was worse than the scream. And I am Claire. Before I dive into this story, tell me in the comments where you're watching from and hit subscribe if you've ever been treated like the forgotten one in your own family. I wasn't surprised those words came out of Karen's mouth. Not really. The truth is, I'd been living with sentences like that my entire life. When my father died, I was 6 years old. My memories of him are blurry, his cologne, the rough warmth of his hands, the way he called me kiddo, as if the word itself could protect me. A year later, Karen remarried Harold and everything changed. David was 8 then, loud, messy, already used to having the world bend around him. And from the first moment Harold moved into our lives, it was clear who mattered and who didn't. I became background noise. Birthdays told the story best. I'd sit at the table balloons tied to the chairs, cake icing sweating under the Tennessee summer heat. David would rip open wrapping paper to reveal a brand new PlayStation or a shiny red bike, the kind with racing stripes. My turn would come, and Karen would hand me a small half-hearted gift, a thrift store sweater that didn't fit, a $5 bill tucked into a plain envelope. Once when I turned 14, she forgot completely and bought me socks from the gas station on her way home. Everyone laughed. Everyone but me. At Christmas, Harold handed David a set of keys, his first car, a used Mustang, he would total within a month. My gift was a Bible with my name misspelled on the cover. Karen clapped like it was special. I wanted to sink through the floor, and yet I kept working, kept proving myself. Straight A's through high school scholarships that barely scratched tuition, late-night shifts at the diner to cover the rest. While David floundered through failed business ideas, first a car wash, then a supplement company, later a ridiculous cryptocurrency empire, I was grinding through college tutoring kids on the side and studying until my eyes burned. Each time David crashed and burned, Harold bailed him out. New loans, new promises. Karen said, "He just needs a chance. He's destined for greatness." When I succeeded, she muttered, "Don't let it go to your head." The hypocrisy was endless. At church, we looked like a picture-perfect family. Karen's pearls gleamed under the stained glass windows. Harold shook hands with the pastor, his booming laugh echoing down the aisles. David strutted through the congregation like he owned it, and me, I sat straight-backed, smiling politely, the dutiful daughter who had it all together. Nobody saw the slammed doors at home. Nobody heard the mocking laughter after every achievement of mine. Nobody noticed the way Karen once whispered in my ear after I made honor roll, "Don't fool yourself. David will always be the future of this family." Those words followed me into adulthood. I poured everything into teaching, into shaping other kids' futures even as mine felt stalled. I stayed late grading essays, gave up weekends for SAT prep, slipped extra snacks into kids' backpacks when I knew their families were struggling. And every cent I earned, I saved. My dream was simple, a little Victorian cottage outside the city, wrap-around porch garden bursting with violets. A place that was mine. A place no one could take. But 6 months ago, Karen called me in tears. "Claire, we're about to lose the house. We'll have nowhere to go." I heard Harold in the background, his voice heavy with defeat. For a second, I wanted to say no, to remind them of all the times they left me stranded, unsupported. But that's not who I am. That's not who I was raised to be. So I caved. I reached into the account I had been building since I was 17 and wired them every dollar, $160,000. 10 years of double shifts, skipped vacations, secondhand clothes, and lonely nights when friends went out, but I stayed behind to save. Every sacrifice I'd made compressed into one desperate check. The deal was clear. The new house on Elm Street would be in my name. They hugged me, called me their savior, told me I was their blessing. For a fragile moment I believed them. I let myself imagine that maybe finally I had earned a place at their table. But deep down, I knew better. I remembered the night of my college graduation when I scanned the crowd for their faces and saw empty seats. They'd skipped it again for one of David's business pitches. I remembered the time I broke my wrist falling off the library ladder at work, calling Karen from the ER, only for her to say, "I can't, honey." David locked his keys in the car again. I remembered the Christmas when Harold announced to a room full of relatives that David was destined for greatness, while I just liked to play teacher. The warning signs had always been there, and as I stood in that dining room now, champagne glasses trembling, David grinning at my expense, I felt them all crashing back at once. Every scar was waiting for its fire. The housewarming party wasn't supposed to feel like a funeral, but that's exactly what it was. The burial of 10 years of my life. Harold's hand still rested on the deed, his knuckles white as if he were anchoring it to the table by sheer force. Karen's pearls gleamed under the chandelier, her lips pressed into that familiar line of disdain. And David... David leaned back in his chair, one hand on Megan's pregnant belly like he was posing for a magazine cover. His smirk was unbearable, the kind of smile that said, "You lost." Again. My chest heaved, heat rising into my throat. "This isn't right," I said, my voice trembling but sharp. That money was everything I had. We had an agreement. Karen rolled her eyes, the sound of her sigh cutting me deeper than any shout. "Stop being dramatic, Claire. You're a teacher. You'll save it up again. David needs stability for his family." Her words landed like a slap. Around us, forks scraped plates, glasses clinked nervously. Guests avoided my eyes, some murmuring, others pretending not to hear. The humiliation swelled in my chest until it felt like I couldn't breathe. David leaned forward, elbows on the table, his voice dripping with mockery. "Come on, Claire. What were you going to do with this house anyway, live here alone with your cats?" Laughter sharp ugly spilled from a few relatives, the kind who had always sided with Karen. My vision blurred, not from tears, but from rage. My hands clenched until my nails bit into my palms. That was it. The years of swallowing their insults, of working myself raw while they bailed out David's failures, of pretending not to notice the favoritism. I couldn't hold it in anymore. Enough. The word tore from my throat, louder than the clinking glasses, louder than the music still playing faintly in the background. Every head turned. Conversations died. The room went utterly still. I shoved my chair back the legs, screeching against the hardwood floor. My heart pounded so hard I thought it might split me open, but my voice came out clear, sharp, undeniable. "You don't get to take 10 years of my life and hand it to him like it's a party favor. You don't get to tell me my sacrifices mean nothing because I don't have a husband or a baby. You don't get to call me selfish when I've been the only one holding this family together." Karen blinked, stunned. Harold's jaw clenched, but he said nothing. David chuckled a low, dismissive sound that made my blood boil. "You'll get over it. You always do." I grabbed the nearest glass of wine, my own, and slammed it down so hard the stem snapped red liquid spilling across the table like blood. Gasps rippled through the room. My pulse thundered in my ears, but I didn't care. "Say that again," I spat, my eyes locked on his. "Say it again, David, and see what happens." His smirk faltered. For the first time all evening, he looked unsure. Karen reached for me, her voice sharp but shaking. "Claire, sit down. You're embarrassing yourself." "No," I said, steady now. "Stronger. I've spent my entire life sitting down while you all trampled over me. Not anymore." The silence after my words was suffocating. Guests whispered, shifted in their seats. Aunt Patricia's eyes shone with something fierce pride, maybe. Rachel gripped her glass tighter, her gaze locked on me like she was silently saying, "Finally." I could feel the room dividing fault lines cracking right through the family's polished facade. For years, I had been the quiet one, the reliable one, the afterthought. But standing there, wine dripping from the shattered glass breath, ragged in my chest, I realized something that both terrified and exhilarated me. I wasn't afraid of them anymore. Karen's voice dropped venom coating each word. "You'll regret this, Claire. Families have long memories. I leaned forward, my hands flat on the table meeting her glare with one of my own. So do I. The chandelier above us hummed faintly, the only sound in the room. David shifted in his seat, his smirk gone replaced by something that looked a lot like fear. I straightened, picked up my purse, and slung it over my shoulder. My legs trembled, but I forced them to move. Every step felt like breaking chains. At the doorway, I turned back one last time, my voice cold final. You think this is just a tantrum, but it's not. This is war. And I walked out the door, slamming so hard behind me the walls shook. When the door slammed behind me, the sound echoed in my skull like a war drum. But instead of trembling with shame, I felt something different. A strange, icy calm. I walked across the porch into the night air, the humid Tennessee summer clinging to my skin. The chatter inside had resumed in hushed, nervous tones, but I didn't care. For once, I wasn't going to go back in and apologize. For once, I wasn't going to beg. Rachel followed me onto the porch, her heels clicking against the wood. Her voice was low, urgent. Claire, you need to call my brother. Daniel. Right now. Daniel, her older brother, a real estate attorney in Nashville. The name sliced through my fog like a blade of clarity. I nodded, my fingers curling around the strap of my purse. I will, I whispered more to myself than to her. As I turned to leave, something caught my eye. The folder. That old manila folder Harold had carelessly left on top of the refrigerator, the same spot Karen always stashed important papers. Guests were distracted, crowding around David and Megan, showering them with congratulations, like none of this was a theft in broad daylight. My body moved before my mind caught up. I slipped into the kitchen, lifted the folder, and slid it into my bag. My heart hammered, but no one noticed. By the time I stepped back onto the porch, my face was cool, unreadable. I need some air, I told Rachel. She squeezed my hand, eyes wide but proud. Outside, under the weak glow of the porch light, I opened the folder with trembling fingers. There, it was the original agreement. My signature, my down payment, the clear stipulation that the deed belonged in my name, and tucked behind it something else. A letter from their lawyer dated just 2 weeks ago. A warning. Transferring this deed without Claire's consent may be considered fraudulent and legally actionable. The words blurred, then sharpened as fury surged in my veins. They hadn't just betrayed me. They had done it knowingly, deliberately. They'd been warned and decided to gamble anyway. I snapped a photo of every page, my phone light glowing like a secret torch in the dark. Then, without another glance back at the glowing windows of the house, I walked to my car, drove home, and let the silence stretch. I didn't answer Karen's texts. Come back inside. Stop sulking. I didn't answer Harold's calls. I didn't even glance at David's smug social media post, New Beginnings at Elm Street, excited for our future. No, my silence was my weapon now. Every unanswered call, every ignored message was gasoline on their growing panic. At 9:00 a.m. sharp the next morning, I walked into Daniel's office downtown. My palms were sweating, but my back was straight. I laid the folder on his desk. They stole my house, I said simply. He skimmed the documents, eyebrows rising, then shaking his head with disbelief. Claire, this isn't just questionable. It's fraud. You provided the down payment, you signed the agreement, and they tried to transfer ownership behind your back. They even ignored a lawyer's warning. That's criminal. Criminal. The word tasted foreign on my tongue. Daniel leaned back, eyes steady on mine. Yes. Grand theft, fraud, forgery depending on the documents. They're counting on you being too quiet, too forgiving to fight back. Are they right? Something in me hardened. Not anymore. His lips curved into a thin smile. Good. Then, here's what we'll do. First, we file for an emergency injunction, stop them from making any changes to the property. Second, we begin proceedings to void the fraudulent transfer. And third, he tapped the lawyer's letter. We let the DA's office take a look, because if your stepdad and mother forged anything, they could be looking at criminal charges. A shiver ran down my spine. I should have felt sick at the thought of Karen in court, Harold in handcuffs, but instead all I felt was a cold, rising power. That night, while my students' essays sat ungraded on my desk, my phone lit up with call after call. Karen, 12 times, Harold, 9, David, 21, messages pinged in a stream of guilt and rage. You're tearing this family apart. How could you do this to your own brother? Think of the baby Claire. Don't be selfish. Answer us. Now. I put my phone face down and sipped my coffee in silence. For the first time in my life, I didn't jump when they demanded. I didn't flinch at their threats. The next morning, my phone buzzed again, not with Karen's voice, but with Daniel's. It's filed, he said. They'll be served within 24 hours. Prepare yourself, the storm is coming. I smiled faintly, staring out the window of my classroom at the neat rows of desks waiting for my students. Let it come, I whispered. Because silence wasn't weakness anymore. It was my sharpened blade. Daniel wasn't wrong. The storm hit within hours. That afternoon, as I finished teaching, Rachel called me, her voice sharp. Claire, don't go home yet. Your mom and David are outside your apartment building. They've been there for an hour. My stomach clenched, but not with fear, with grim anticipation. Let them wait, I said flatly. But when I finally pulled into the parking lot, I saw them. Karen pacing like a caged animal, David leaning against his truck with his arms crossed, face red with fury. Harold sat in the driver's seat, avoiding eye contact like he always did when things got ugly. The moment I stepped out, Karen rushed forward. Claire, please don't do this. You're tearing this family apart. Her voice cracked, perfectly rehearsed, the kind of performance that might have fooled me once. Family. I repeated, my tone icy. Family doesn't forge signatures. David pushed past her, his finger stabbing the air. Do you even hear yourself? I have a wife and a baby on the way. You're really going to steal a house from us just because you're bitter. Grow up, Claire. I laughed, short and sharp. Steal. You mean the house I paid for. The house with my name on the original agreement. The one you tried to snatch like a spoiled child grabbing someone else's toy. His face reddened further. You'll regret this. I swear you'll regret this. Karen grabbed my wrist, her eyes shining with tears. Honey, think of your nephew. He deserves a home. Don't punish him for your pride. I pulled my arm free, the old guilt trying to creep in but finding no foothold. No, Mom. This isn't about a baby. This is about you choosing David's comfort over my life's work. Again. And I'm done paying the bill. Behind them, Harold finally spoke, his voice low but edged with warning. You don't understand what you're getting into, Claire. Lawyers' courtrooms. It'll get ugly. Do you really want to drag this family's name through the mud? I met his gaze evenly. You already did that when you signed fraudulent papers. They weren't used to this version of me, the one who didn't cry, didn't beg, didn't fold. And it rattled them. The next wave came, fast whispers in the community. At church that Sunday, the pastor's sermon was pointed, almost rehearsed. Forgiveness keeps families whole, he said, his eyes lingering on me in the pew. Karen sat 2 rows behind, dabbing her eyes with a tissue, the perfect grieving mother. People glanced at me with pity, some with judgment. The smear campaign had begun. Rachel leaned close, muttering, They've weaponized the church now. Classic. By Monday morning, the whispers spread further. A colleague approached me at school, lowering her voice. Claire, I heard your family said you're suing them. Over money, is that true? My throat tightened, but I forced myself to answer calmly. I'm protecting myself. That's all. The shame they wanted me to feel flickered inside me, but it didn't stick. Not this time. That evening, my phone lit up with a flood of messages. David sent threats thinly veiled as promises. You'll end up alone. Don't think anyone will take your side when this is over. Harold left voicemails, his tone measured, almost businesslike. Withdraw now, Claire. We'll find another way. You don't want this fight. And Karen. Karen alternated between venom and guilt. One moment you're a selfish, ungrateful child. I should have known better than to rely on you. The next, I didn't mean it. Please, sweetheart, let's sit down and work this out as a family. I ignored them all. Silence became my shield. Every unanswered call was proof that they no longer controlled me. But their desperation only grew. On Wednesday night, a neighbor texted me a photo David's truck parked across from my apartment, headlights off. Watching, waiting. My pulse jumped, but I refused to let fear take root. Instead, I called Daniel, my voice steady. "They're escalating." "Good," he replied. "It means they're scared. Let them unravel, it only strengthens your case." Still, the pressure was suffocating. At school, in the grocery store, at church, everywhere I went, their storm followed. People whispered that I was cruel, that I was destroying my family over a house. They didn't know the truth, and my family counted on that. But every accusation, every manipulative plea only forged my resolve. One night, after ignoring yet another string of calls, I stood in front of my bathroom mirror gripping the sink until my knuckles turned white. For years, I'd seen weakness in that reflection. Dark circles, tired eyes, the quiet one who never fought back. But now I saw steel. They thought rage would drown me, I whispered to my own reflection. But it only made me stronger. The storm raged louder by the day, and I knew the final strike was coming. The morning of the court hearing, the sky over Nashville was heavy with clouds, the kind that threatened rain, but held it back just long enough to make the air feel suffocating. I walked into the courthouse with Daniel at my side, my heels clicking on the marble floor, each step echoing like a countdown. Karen, Harold, and David were already there, clustered together like conspirators caught mid-scheme. Karen's eyes were red and puffy tissues clutched in her hand. Harold avoided my gaze, studying the tiled floor as if it might swallow him whole. David smirked his suit a size too tight, his arrogance still intact. Karen whispered when she saw me, her voice breaking. "Please don't do this. Families shouldn't fight in court." I met her eyes evenly. Families shouldn't steal from each other either. Inside the courtroom, the judge's voice was steady, clinical. "We are here to determine the rightful ownership of the property located on Elm Street." Daniel rose crisp and confident, laying out every piece of evidence: my bank transfers, the signed agreement, the lawyer's warning letter. He held up documents where my signature had been forged. The silence in the room grew heavy, broken only by the scratching of pens and the shuffle of papers. When it was their turn, Harold's lawyer fumbled, trying to paint it as a family misunderstanding. Karen dabbed her eyes, whispering about sacrifice, about Claire's duty as a daughter. David muttered about his baby, about needing stability. But the judge wasn't swayed. Finally, the moment came. "Ms. Monroe, do you wish to address the court?" I stood, my palms damp, but my voice clear. "Yes, Your Honor. For years, I've been the one they leaned on. Every bill, every crisis, every mistake mine to fix. I gave them everything I had, even my future, and in return, they forged my name. They stole my savings. They told me I was nothing because I don't have a husband or a child. Well, I am not nothing. I am not invisible, and I won't be erased from what I earned with my own 2 hands." My words rang through the room. Karen bowed her head. Harold stiffened, and for the first time, David's smirk cracked. The judge's ruling was swift. The deed transfer is void. Ownership of the Elm Street property is reinstated to Claire Monroe. Furthermore, damages and legal fees will be paid by the defendants. This court will also forward evidence of potential fraud to the district attorney's office. The gavel struck. The sound was final, like the closing of a coffin. Outside, the air was thick with the storm finally breaking. Karen rushed toward me, tears streaming. "Claire, honey, we can fix this." I stepped back, lifting a notarized settlement paper Daniel handed me. "Sign this acknowledgement of what you did, and maybe the DA will go easier. But don't you dare call me honey. Not after everything." She broke down, scribbling her name. Harold followed, silent. David dragged the pen across the page with a glare that could have set fire to stone. When it was over, I looked David in the eye. "You said I'd regret this. But I don't. You do." I turned away, the weight of their stares like shadows I no longer lived under. A week later, standing in Daniel's office with the new deed in my hands, I felt the strangest sense of freedom, not just from them, but from the version of myself who had once accepted scraps and called it love. Then came my final move. I sold the house. The profit combined with the settlement was more than enough to buy my dream a lakeside cottage with a wraparound porch and a garden plot waiting for new life. The day I signed the sale papers, Rachel hugged me so hard I almost laughed. "They're going to be furious," she said. "Good," I replied. "Let them choke on it. They thought they could use me forever. Now they have nothing." That evening, as I stood on the porch of my new home, watching the sun bleed orange over the Tennessee hills, my phone buzzed with another call from Karen. I let it ring. Then I powered it off. The silence was sweeter than any apology they could ever offer. They lost me. That was their punishment. In the weeks that followed, life shifted in ways I hadn't imagined. The Elm Street house was gone, signed over to a developer who saw profit where I had once seen betrayal. And yet, I didn't mourn it. That house had become a monument to their manipulation. Selling it was like cutting the last rope, tethering me to their chaos. My lakeside cottage became more than just a home. It became a sanctuary. On mornings before school, I'd sip coffee on the porch, the water shimmering gold in the sunrise, and breathe without the weight of someone else's expectations on my chest. At night, I dug my hands into the soil of the garden, planting violets, tomatoes, cucumbers. Each seed felt like an act of defiance, each bloom a reminder I chose myself. But the echoes of their storm didn't disappear overnight. Karen still called. Harold still sent letters filled with half apologies and veiled accusations. David. Well, David spiraled further, his marriage crumbling, his debts piling. Once he showed up at the cottage unannounced, demanding I be reasonable. I didn't even open the door. I just called the sheriff and watched from the window as his truck peeled out in defeat. For the first time in my life, their chaos didn't control me. Instead, something unexpected began to happen. People noticed. My colleagues at school whispered that I seemed lighter, more confident. A younger teacher pulled me aside one afternoon, tears in her eyes, and said, "If you could stand up to your family, maybe I can stand up to mine." My students saw a version of me who smiled more, who wasn't crushed by invisible burdens. And me, I finally understood something I should have learned long ago. Family isn't blood. Family is choice. Family is the people who see you, who respect you, who never ask you to burn yourself to keep them warm. For me, that family was Rachel, Aunt Patricia, Daniel, and the quiet resilience I found within myself. On the porch one evening as fireflies rose from the grass and the lake glimmered in the twilight, Rachel lifted her wine glass toward me. To boundaries she toasted. I smiled, clinking my glass against hers. To growth. And in that moment, surrounded by peace instead of poison, I realized something profound. I didn't need revenge. I needed freedom. And I had it. But now I'll ask you, because stories like mine don't exist in a vacuum. What would you have done in my place? Would you have walked away, let them keep what they stole, swallowed the betrayal just to keep the family intact? Or would you have fought back, even if it meant being branded the villain, the ungrateful one, the daughter who refused to sacrifice one more piece of her soul? Drop your answer in the comments. I want to know. Because maybe, just maybe, my story isn't only mine. Maybe it's yours too.